Davis. Did you learn at the academy that for some crimes the police cannot be the victim? Objection sustained. Like for disturbing the peace with offensive language, you can't be the victim, right? Objection sustained. Can you explain what the Fourth Amendment protects American citizens from? Objection, not relevant. Sustain. This is not a law exam or civil rights action. Based on your training, do you believe that different crimes have different elements? Objection, sustain. Would you agree that the difference between a Terry stop and a consensual contact is if you had already developed reasonable suspicion, it's a Terry stop, and if you have not yet developed a reasonable suspicion, it's a consensual contact? Objection. Sustained. Hypothetical. I want you to focus on that level of suspicion, okay? Because as you investigate, suspicion can increase. Or it can decrease, right? Objection. Sustain. Not an expert. Vague. No foundation. Ambiguous. Did that statement that he tried to go up to the third floor make your suspicion level go up, down, or stay the same? Objection. Sustain. You fabricated that whole highlighted part of your January 22nd police report, didn't you? Objection. Sustain. Please look carefully into your police report and find the moment in your written chronology when you turned on your body camera. Which sentence is it? Objection. This is foraging question. Sustain. Not allowed. What were the exigent circumstances that you needed to know his identification immediately? Objection. Sustain. Did you ever conduct a show-up identification of Mr. Hines? Objection. No testimony that he knows that means. Sustain. Upon making contact with the individual, what crime had you determined that the individual had committed? Objection. Answered. Sustain. Was the individual in the commission of a crime at the time you made contact? Objection. Sustain. Did you charge that individual with any crime other than failure to ID? Objection. Sustain. You saw a discrepancy between what was reported and what you observed, correct? Objection. Sustain. Having seen a discrepancy, were you alerted to be cautious in assessing each of your other pieces of knowledge that the dispatcher told you? Objection. No foundation. Sustain. Your Honor, I want to show Officer Davis CCRP 218.1 and I ask that the court take judicial notice. Objection. Sustain. Owsley, I'm not going to allow him to be quizzed on criminal code. You didn't, quote, advise fully the reason, unquote, because you follow the law and Mr. Hines wasn't detained, right? Objection. Sustain. So he was detained under 14-108, the resisting or obstruction statute, but not detained under 218.1. I'm confused. You can't have it both ways, can you? Objection. Sustain. Your Honor, I want to show Officer Davis Louisiana Statute Title 14, Section 106, and ask that the court take judicial notice. Not allowed. You're not charged with that crime. Take your time. Is this the obscenity law you have in mind that you claim Mr. Hines violated? Not allowed. They might later after forensic exam. Child porn. And if your claim that Mr. Hines displayed pornography is true, who is the victim? Objection. Sustain. I would like to draw your attention to section capital D as in dog, number 1. Do you see that? Objection. Sustain. On the second line, do you see public libraries? Objection. Sustain. I'm going to read to you, and I want you to tell me if it's right. The provisions of this section do not apply to recognized and established public libraries. See that? Objection. Sustain. This is something that you knew, right? Objection. Sustain. You played the audio on the voice recorder of Mr. Hines. You did that without a warrant, correct? Objection. Sustain. You know that Miss Parker was interviewed after the arrest, right? Objection. Sustain. You included things in your January 22nd report that you didn't learn until your post-arrest investigation, right? Objection. Sustain. End of Davis. Cross-exam dispatcher Nikita Scott. I would like the clerk to be ready to play the 2 audio recordings which Mr. Benjamin's office gave to me on the thumb drive, and I provided that thumb drive to the court clerk. Owsley says not allowed. And I have transcripts. The transcripts are not evidence, the recordings are. But for the court's convenience, I have transcripts and everybody can have a copy. I'm not able to share those with the audio is playing. Owsley says not allowed. Your Honor, I would like to play again the recording of the 911 call. Then ask the question again. Owsley says not allowed. So everything that you stated about his behavior was based on changing the words that the caller used to words that police would typically use then, correct? Owsley says not allowed. You testify that you know your words are important, but in this case, the words that you chose were not an accurate description of what the caller told you about the suspect. Would that be an accurate statement? Objection. Sustain. Cross-exam Carlo Jimenez. No objections. Cross-exam Librarian Parker. You felt unsafe? Objection. Sustain. Your Honor, I'd like to hand Miss Parker a transcript of her video recorded interview with the police. Owsley says not allowed. Your Honor, I request that Miss Parker's video interview be entered into evidence. Okay. Your Honor, here is a copy of the transcript for you and the prosecutor.
Here's the river.
Owsley says not allowed.